It's one of those songs that make you want to have chocolate. It is Mikasa. You're listening to 919, powered by Social TV. This is a social impact show. Thank you very much for joining us. And it's simple. This is our mandate.
Sam Marshall shares uplifting stories and conversations with people making Johannesburg and the world a better place.
And that's what we're doing. So we're journeying into a story of global solidarity and creative resistance. Freedom Park has just launched the Beyond Borders exhibition, a powerful tribute to 30 years of democracy and the pivotal role Dutch-South African solidarity played during the anti-apartheid movement. Joining me now on the line is Jessica Glendinning, who is the Policy Officer for Culture and Media at the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, to unpack this landmark collaboration and how art, archives, and activism continue to unite our nations beyond borders. Jessica, good morning and thanks for joining me.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this sounds incredibly exciting in terms of this exhibition at this really iconic institution place in South Africa. But maybe a little bit before we talk about the actual exhibition and this collaboration, let's talk about just kind of the relationship between South Africa and the Netherlands and, you know, building this solidarity, this relationship, and that especially started during the anti-apartheid movement.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the relationship between South Africa and the Netherlands goes back a very long way, much further than that. And we definitely have a very troubled history, and that's something that we engage with as the embassy frequently. But more recently, of course, we have this incredible history where people in the Netherlands were outraged by what they heard happening in South Africa. And many gave their entire lives to raising support, joining the struggle movement, some in South Africa themselves, and supporting the political movement from outside of the country to promote freedom and democracy in South Africa, and really played quite a big part in what we are now celebrating, this coming weekend as our democracy.
Yeah, and I think what's really amazing about this exhibition and how it focuses on some of those elements, and we'll talk about it, but really talking about, maybe at the theme of it is this collaboration, this relationship. We have had, even as South Africans to a large degree, a very different take on the kind of relationship between the Netherlands and South Africa. And I think a exhibition, and I think the thing that makes me super excited is that we need to now live in a world where we're kind of celebrating the positives, and we need to highlight partnerships and collaborations that work. It's easy to get caught up in kind of the past, in a very negative stereotype of the past. But I think that this Beyond Borders really is exciting. Are you guys excited at the potential of telling a very different story?
Yeah, I mean, of course, and it's important to look at all sides of the story. But I think what is really amazing about this story, and of course, it's not just the Dutch. There were many other nations involved, but it really shows how countries really rely on each other to uphold democracy, freedom, human rights. As we say in South Africa, with Ubuntu, a person is a person because of other people.
Yeah.
And so too, a country is a country, a nation is a nation because of other nations. And we live in a world where things are changing, things are getting a little bit more scary. We see different countries reacting in different ways. But I think that fundamentally we believe that the spirit of supporting each other, the spirit of upholding democracy, freedom, human rights is really important, and that we have to do it together. So it's not just a question of how we uphold these things within our own countries, but how do we support other countries to do that within their borders?
Yeah. And as you talked about, we are obviously celebrating 30 years of democracy in South Africa currently, but also at the same time, we're also as we reflect on our achievement as South Africans, not just in the context of South Africa, but in the context of Africa, the role that we play globally. We also have challenges at the moment, and it's refreshing to have this kind of exhibition happening at the moment. What are you hoping to achieve with this exhibition?
Well, I think what I'm really hoping is that people will be incredibly inspired by these stories. And I think that, so apartheid was such a clear challenge. It was such a very strong thing that we could unite against and see how we could stand up to it. But I think that we often forget how much work went into defeating apartheid. And I think when you look at these stories and you look at the history and you see how people in all different walks of life and in different ways fought against apartheid through radio broadcasting,
Yeah.
through mission work, through like underground movements and military movements. There are so many different ways that people stood up against it. And I think that we need to really acknowledge that it's not some mythical time that people suddenly ended. People really fought against it, and I think young people especially should be inspired by what has taken place and say, no, democracy is something that we can fight for and that we can maintain. And how do we do that? And how do we act in our day-to-day lives um,
Yeah, and this is a
with that in
recognition.
mind?
Yeah, and it's a recognition of artistic activism, and it's really from looking at posters to records to work commissioned by Moria. Yeah, I think it's incredible, and even now, from we see the creative industries, people in the creative industries. Kind of have an alternative voice to kind of mainstream, and in many ways saying the things that we currently, as individuals, as peoples, as countries, kind of the stuff that we sometimes too scared to say publicly. There's a lot of artistic activism that's currently happening, and we can see it through social media and through some very prolific voices. You earlier talked about stories, and many of those stories. As somebody who's obviously been part of this journey, what is maybe one story that you can share with our audiences that stood out for you as part of this exhibition?
Well, I think possibly my favorite thing in the exhibition is it's a mock-up. Unfortunately, we couldn't use the originals because they are too fragile. But Lucia Radschalders was a Dutch anti-apartheid activist. She was part of Operation Vula, which was an underground movement aimed to establish communication between prisoners and ANC leaders in exile. And she used novels, books, to smuggle information. And how they did that is they would highlight words in the books in an invisible ink that could only be seen under UV light. So and some of those original books of hers, she donated to the South African History Archives, one of our partners here. And we have a mock-up of one of those books in the exhibition where you can switch on a UV light and you can see how they shared messages um,
That
to
sounds
people who were
amazing.
in exile. It really is quite incredible.
That sounds absolutely amazing. Worthwhile visiting this exhibition. The poem "Unclenched Fists" is particularly moving. Can you share a bit about how the collaboration with Hear My Voice came about and why? Poetry has always been for me a very powerful medium, always incredibly powerful, depending on what era, what it talks about, what it reflects on, and even the personal journeys of individuals. But talk to me about why poetry was chosen as a centerpiece.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. Poetry is so powerful, and especially spoken word. I think it has a way of connecting to people. And we wanted to create something. We wanted something that wasn't just from the past, something that was looking forward. And I have seen Hear My Voice's work in different spaces, and I really admire the work that they do. So we reached out to them and shared their ideas. We had a brainstorming session. I said, what I really want is I want people to come in and really be inspired. And so they found this incredible duo, Yamaria, and we commissioned them for this poem. We talked a little bit about what we really wanted to come out of the poem. And they wrote this incredible piece, Unclenched Fists, which is inspiring. I mean, it is a recognition of the work that has been done, but also so much a celebration of the present and the future and
Yeah.
what we can look forward to.
Yeah, the exhibition is currently running and it ends in June month, which is in South Africa Youth Month, right? And this
Mm.
exhibition highlights extraordinary, ordinary people. What lessons do you think today's generation can draw from those who took a stand so many decades ago?
I think what I hope that they will draw from it is that you don't have to be voted into a position of power to do something. You don't even have to be born into a position of power. Wherever you are, you within your field of work, your community, you have an opportunity to act with integrity to what you believe, to stand up for what you believe. And we're called in different ways to do that, depending on where we are and what we do, and whether you are, a religious leader or a community leader within a religious organization, or working in, a radio as you do, or
Yeah.
a writer. All of these different things, or even just a parent. I'm just a parent. I mean, parents obviously play a huge role.
Yeah, they do.
Teachers, students in schools, wherever you are, there is something that you can do to move our communities, our countries, and our world closer towards democracy, towards equality, towards equity. And I think that that is something that is really an empowering thought for the future. So it's not really about looking at the past. It's actually about how do we learn from the past? How does that guide us going
Yeah.
forward?
I think these are such important questions, especially in the current climate. This climate feels very fragile to me, and alliances are made easily, broken easily, and I think our past is very, very important, and I think it's something that we need to hold on to, especially as we kind of move into this new whatever this direction is, especially as geopolitical situations change, and we even as a country evolve, and different leaders bring different elements. This exhibition currently coincides as well with South Africa's G20 presidency. Does a moment like this, maybe this question should be asked, does a moment like this present an opportunity for us to really reflect on our past partnerships and also look at what new ones could potentially look like?
Yeah, I definitely think that it does, because I mean the G20 is the coming together of the 20 biggest economic um, powers in the world, and we as the Netherlands are also very privileged to have been invited to the G20, so we are participating, and it's a space where we can engage and discuss topics that are important to us. And that is still important. We see a lot of countries turning inward, or thinking that it doesn't matter how other countries perceive them,
Yeah.
and what they do. And that's just not true. I mean, we live now in such a globalized world that we are all in some ways up in each other's faces. We impact each other with what we do. So I think that the South Africa holding the G20 this year, what South Africa stands for to a lot of people, and I think that sometimes in South Africa we forget this,
We
that
do.
the story of Nelson Mandela and the story of overcoming apartheid is something that is known around the world, and that South Africa is actually an emblem for a lot of people of this moment of achieving democracy, of defeating this regime. And I think that we have the G20, we have this theme, solidarity, equality. I'm going to forget the last one, but we really have this moment to go. Whatever is crazy and happening in the world, we're still going to talk to each other. We're still going to be in dialogue with each other. We're still going to support each other. And I think that that's what it really comes down to, working in a multilateral space. We as South Africa, we as the Netherlands, we believe in working together. And that is what is most important.
Yeah, the theme is solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
Sustainability.
Yeah. And maybe as a final question, if we reflect the ties between South Africa and the Netherlands, especially around cultural diplomacy and initiatives like Beyond Borders, it really does, in your mind, as a country, it does deepen those ties between us, South Africa and the Netherlands, as we reflect on this very disturbing past. But to your point as well, that there has been triumph and success over evil. There has been. We all remember those iconic moments when our very first democratically elected president stood in the halls of power. We understand what we've gone through over the last 30 years as a country. Many will argue that we haven't done enough, but a lot of us that are not blindsided by one element will recognize that a lot has been achieved, but a lot still needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely true, and obviously we take note of how far we've come and where we've come from, but the main focus has to be on where we're going. And I think that culture is such an important tool in how we relate. Um, Culture in general, but also cultural diplomacy, because when we come from different spaces, different cultures, different ideologies, sometimes it's very hard to have a conversation. And when we engage in cultural activity together, we're able to actually enter into other people's feelings and connect on a much deeper level and understand things that are sometimes very difficult to talk about. And that, in particular, when we look at our past, at the colonial legacy here in South Africa, is really important because it holds so much pain, it holds so much emotion, it holds so many different views and people not understanding each other and not understanding how it's impacted each other. That I often feel like culture is the only way that we can really reach a space of understanding. And once we've reached a space of understanding, of course, we can change our actions going forward. We can change many other things, but it really starts with coming to a space of understanding. And I think culture is so powerful for that.
Yeah, and I think if I could just read a line out of that poem from Hear My Voice, it says, there is alchemy in binding of two nations, the merging of two voices. Burdens were not designed to be carried alone, like voices were conceived to sing in unison.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a beautiful line. And it's so beautiful to be able to hear Yamaria, the two poets, say it. And it is actually, they have been recorded performing their poem, and it is available online through a QR code. If you're at the exhibition, you can read the poem and you can go through the QR code, but also on Hear My Voice's website.
That's brilliant. A little bit of details quickly, Jessica. The ugly part of this interview is that we've got to get the details out so people can support it. It's at Freedom Park and it's running until the 30th of June.
That's absolutely right. It's at Freedom Park. It's in their big exhibition space, right next to the restaurant, so you can go through it and then go for lunch or a drink or tea. And it's got a little bit of space for interaction. We have a voting booth where people can share what they think is the most important pillar of democracy, and also a selfie wall, of course, where
Of course.
you can join a march and raise your fist in solidarity. And we really hope that it will inspire a lot of people.
Jessica, thank you very much for joining us and talking us through this amazing exhibition called Beyond Borders.
Thank you for having me. Good day to listeners.
Great. That's Jessica Glendinning, who's the policy officer for culture and media at the Embassy of the Kingdom of Netherlands, talking to us about this landmark collaboration and how art, archives, and activism continue to unite our nations in an exhibition called Beyond Borders at Freedom Park. Runs until the 30th of June. You've got no excuses. Go and support it. Go and find out more. And go and just look at the interesting part of history. This is such an interesting part of history, and it's such a creative way of telling it. So I expect all of you to go, especially if you're in the area, but maybe a great drive in the afternoon to head out to Freedom Park.